Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah? Okay, that's good. The reason I asked that is because, when you go into a rock concert, for some reason or the other, the band asks, "Can you hear me?" Now, slight problem with that. If you've paid £150 to attend a concert and the answer is no, slight problem, A. B, what are you going to actually do about it if they say no, right? Now, the reason I mentioned rock concerts is because my belief has always basically been that as technology has entered education, it's about being able to create a better experience. And Hult International Business School, where I've worked for the last three and a half years, is a little bit of a quirky place, I like to describe it. We have campuses in London, Boston, Dubai, Shanghai, and San Francisco. We just added a small rotation campus in Sao Paulo, and we just got approval for setting up a campus in New York. So yes, my life is involved in a lot of traveling. I just came back from Dubai. I'll be going to the US next week, etc. And that's part of is actually investing in the infrastructure, deploying out new systems, and then about 2.5 years ago, I was tasked by the board to deploy out a few thousand iPads. Interesting when that comes along, especially when you ask the question before you're hired that they've made this decision, and you say, what would you want to achieve with this? And they said, we don't know about that, but when you figure it out, let us know. I was like, thank you for that. So it's a pretty career-limiting discussion in the first month, actually. And then I said, well, okay, iPads. I mean, it's a great device. Go to Apple, most iconic brand in the world. You should go and speak to them and ask them. So I went over to Apple, and I said, hi, we need to save my career here. How is the iPad going to change education? And they said, we don't know, but when you find out, could you let us know? Because other people ask you the question. So I took a step back and I said, what is the world that we live in? And this is not a philosophy lecture by any measure. Not even, that's way above my pay grade, and intelligence for that matter. But I sort of observed, I went on a journey of observing classrooms and observing faculty, looking at our campuses, and looking at our curriculum. And I came to a few conclusions, and I sort of understood, and I spoke to other CIOs, and I spoke to professors that I'd worked with, and I took my own experience. And the world that we live in, or the way I perceive it, is that it is kind of an app store economy. We've sort of moved into this world where it's effectively an entirely new marketplace. A new industry is entirely created. It's kind of crazy if you think about it. 250,000 apps in the App Store for the iPad, 25 billion downloads in total. Anyone heard of an app called Around Me? Right. That's created by one guy, friend of a friend of mine, one person sitting in his kitchen in Milan. His name is Marco Pifferi. 6 million downloads. That's his business. And there's 250,000 people, probably companies out there building these apps. It's in our vernacular now. There's an app for that, right? We're too lazy now to actually stand outside in the rain and hail a black cab. We go into Halo and hail it like I did this morning. I waited 5 minutes, turned up, worked pretty well. So that's the mindset of the student body that's walking into our classrooms. We need to be able to actually understand to use that to our advantage. And that is the discussion that I was having with educators. And largely, classroom engagement and student engagement for me and for professors, when I spoke to them around the world, was very, very important. I think the interesting aspect of where I work is the fact that we are global and that I get to understand the different cultural mindset and the different teaching styles of teaching a business degree. We have 7 programs, largely focused around business, with a 1-year MBA program that we use for rotation purposes. And then I started doing research in the industry, and in terms of everything that I saw, all of the vendors that are out there, they're seeing a great it's a downward trend with respect to notebooks, especially in higher ed when it comes to business schools where it's mandatory to have an iPad, mandatory to have a laptop. We saw, definitely a downward trend when it comes to notebook adoption and where that was. And then I was asked the question, of course, as every IT director will tell you, they usually have a cousin problem. The board member's cousin runs a telecoms company. The office manager's cousin runs a taxi service. And obviously, I had professors who were saying, well, why can't we use Kindle? I hate Apple. Okay, fair enough. I can look into that discussion. The reality is we're going to get to a stage where, as Kaylin mentioned, we talk about BYOD a lot of the time. it's going to, device is going to become irrelevant. But we had a decision to make about saying, where do we provide the best experience? And we did a little bit of a comparison in terms of where Kindle was, where it was focused, and of course, where Apple was in terms of with respect to the iPad. Was it about content? Very much so. Was it about experience? Of course. And it was also about my challenge basically being, how do I deploy these things globally? Because I'd like to do it consistently. And when we did all of that discovery, one of the things was to basically say, how do you change the perception for it being a consumption device and move it into a productive environment? It's one of the biggest challenges that I typically faced. If you look at doing any surveys around what people use the iPad for, except for tweeting about this extremely boring conversation that I'm having right now, is basically that you're not using a productive environment. So I took that journey and said, well, actually, we need to try and change that and move that in the classroom. So we reviewed a whole bunch of different apps for productivity purposes, and we actually narrowed those down. Last year, what we actually did was we actually did a volume purchase and gave them out to students. That was one thing. And we narrowed it down to some of the key productivity ones that we thought were relevant. So iAnnotate was a great app that was used because we knew that a lot of our students look at PDFs and Harvard case studies. Keynote, which is what this presentation is currently running on, and this is why we're changing equipment, running it off my iPad, was used for presentations. Numbers, well, is it the equivalent of Excel? Not really. Can you do complex macros on it? Not really. So, but can you view Excel sheets that have been sent to you? Absolutely. Pages, the equivalent of Word. And then an interesting debate actually came into place, say, what is the best note-taking app? The fact that we were having a debate around note-taking and apps was an interesting fact to see that in the student body, that actually people were having this discussion. And SoundNote is kind of the discussion that we sort of took with faculty who took it on board. There are a whole bunch of people who are of the school of thought around Evernote, and they love that app. Absolutely fine, as long as you can take it. And then we said, financial calculator is absolutely fine. Now, I'm of the opinion, and you may disagree, that 2 plus 2 usually equals 4. Now, that may be shocking to some of you, but there are about 127 companies who built different calculator apps. Now, I can't tell you that it took me 3 weeks to be able to decide the right calculator app amongst faculty and professors, but we decided on the free one and the most popular one as a common metric, and we just went from there. But the other thing that we did was we said, well, if students walk in, how do you actually take it to the next level? So we actually did a whole bunch of training to students. So over 2,000 of our students last year and 2,500 students this year have been trained on use of the iPad literally in the first week. Now, it's not optional. It's actually part of their first week of orientation, number one. And number two, the policy that we've put together is the fact that they need to make sure they will use it in the classroom. The question was asked, well, how are you going to mandate that? Well, we did the exact same thing with the faculty. And that was a journey which I undertook personally, having to deal with them, and a lot of my engineers, as well as our technology adoption team, actually undertook over months and months of time doing one-to-one sessions, going over them, explaining, helping them with the setup, and getting them adopted to it. But you take care of productivity, and that's fine, maybe take some notes, view some presentations, but then you need to think about content. And, textbooks, just to give you an idea, the US textbook market is a $16 billion market. And the Harry Potters of this world and the fiction market is a smaller market. But the issue is that marketing management by Kotler is not going to be shown on an advert on the M25. And there's not going to be any movie made about it. The reality is no one's attacked that industry. E-textbooks still has not been taken up. And that was a challenge I had a couple of years ago. So when we started doing research about where we could provide this, there were very, very few providers. Some were only US-centric and only dealt with those. And I have a global challenge. And then the other part was actually about what we could provide as part of the experience. Fundamentally, you can easily automate the process. And that's the easy one. Get a PDF of a textbook, put it out there, let people do what they want with it. But actually, how does that change education? How does that change the experience in the classroom? How does it benefit the actual student? And that's the research that we undertook, basically. This is a photograph of a suitcase. It weighs 26 kilos. It is the excess baggage that a Hult alum of 2011 had to take with all of his academic content. You know, paid several $1,000s for it, so he felt it was important to sort of keep it and travel and take it back to him to Germany. But it was kind of significant of the fact to say, surely there must be a better way to be able to do this. So there's a company called Inkling, who we got to know. I followed the venture capital industry very closely in the US, and they had invested in a company called Sequoia Capital, had invested in a company called Inkling. So I called them up, and they said, we'd like to talk to you. So they did a deal with Pearson and a couple of other major publishers, and they created a really important aspect around textbooks. And then I asked the question about, well, how important are textbooks to students? And I discovered that actually 53% of the, you know, it's actually a lot cheaper for students to have digital textbooks. And I think in large fact that it's actually something that they really, really want. What they're willing to sacrifice, I can't really testify towards, but you know, that's not an official survey by any measure. So what does Inkling do? Well, Inkling provide effectively a digital version of the textbook, but they do it in high fidelity, and they try and make the experience, and I really do apologize for saying that experience. I'm slightly a bit jet lagged, so the word experience is kind of repeating in my head when I was practicing the presentation in economy class in British Airways this morning. So I'll just go with it. It wasn't, unfortunately, I couldn't connect it up to the small screen that doesn't work with bad audio and only one head working. But, you know, God bless British Airways, right? You know, so this is, for example, the marketing management book by Kotler. What they've effectively done is been able to provide it, and you can get a free chapter of every book on Inkling. And the way it actually lists things out, you know, it looks much better. But the benefit to a lot of our students is the fact that all the textbooks are available and accessible on one device. You know, and that's the Inkling app that you can download. We go away from situations where you have to go to the back and look at the glossary and say, oh, okay, right, what's the answer to that, and come back to it, when actually, in fact, they should be able to basically appear accordingly. Same thing with highlighting notes and being able to do that. And lastly, being able to actually, instead of having a 3-page case study that you need to remember, actually put the actually live video feed and actually stream it. And what Inkling have done is pretty amazing, that they've literally taken a book page by page, some of the best sellers, and they've said, how can we make this better? And that's what they provided. This is my dear friend Kim Bellerman. She's the Associate Registrar in our campus in Russell Square. And this was the case pack distribution process. People were literally queuing up for academic content because it's digital rights management. It's been shipped over from the US, and they're signing for it. And the question was, how can we make this process a lot easier, especially when we start adding more campuses? And an interesting situation where I never thought I had to deal with customs officials as much as I did in, say, China or Dubai, when I was sending Harvard case studies trying to explain the fact that actually it is not capitalist propaganda. Now, it may well be capitalist propaganda, but I don't want to tell the Chinese customs official that when they arrive. And this is the sort of small challenges that you start to basically see. You sort of take it for granted that it's just paper and it's just educational content. It's actually, it doesn't make it easy. So I went behind the China firewall and said, okay, maybe there's a way to basically figure this out and do it digitally. Don't tell them this, by the way, just in case you're wondering. We partnered up with our distributor, who does a lot of the digital rights management, ownership around it. We looked at our case packs, and we actually developed an app in partnership with them, which is called the Hult Reader, and we're basically using that to deploy all of our case study content onto the iPad. It's simply, we're using the digital rights management piece is very well done because it's held in the cloud in terms of where the servers are. You enter in an access code, you create an account, and it basically registers accordingly. And then as a result of that, we had a saving of over 40% in printing costs and distribution costs as a result of this. So the logistical benefit of actually deploying this device for this purpose alone really, really benefited. Not just for academic content, but when we had internal communication content that we wanted to send out, whether the student handbook or the faculty handbook, we could deploy it via this app. And that's the direction that we basically moved into. And from personal experience, I did not feel that the classroom experience that we're in at the moment was fair, or at least the one that I was in. It was always about who was at the front, who was at the back, who could hear closely, who could write notes quickly, and that is not fair if you don't have some of that ability. And I took that from personal experience because I was the guy, okay, truth be told, yes, I was talking at the back, so okay, that's fair enough. Sometimes I wasn't paying attention, but largely, even when I was sitting in front, my old professor at King's College London was like, okay, I'm done now, thank you. And I was like, okay, I just missed that. So if you take away all of the stuff that we talked about, one of the things we looked at was classroom engagement. The fact that, you just want to be able to make sure that faculty and students are being able to interact and be able to register where they are. And this is not new or novel, but again, we use the ability for using mobility around iPhones and BlackBerries and Android devices, and for us, the iPad, to be able to basically increase classroom engagement. How do we do that? Responseware, again, you deploy it and a faculty member installs it on their laptop. They're able to run polls literally during the class. The question therefore becomes, how do you get a good balance between it being overly interactive and actually making sure that it's valuable content? And that's really where we got to. So now, for example, instead of the professor saying, okay, I've been teaching this course for 10 years, and he asks the exact same question and basically says, do you know the answer to this question? If you think about a one-hour class, especially in a teaching school like ours, the half-hearted answer sort of comes from the front, and there's someone at the back who's probably English is not, they're not confident, or English is not their most strongest language, and they're like saying, I knew the answer to that, and now I've wasted 5 minutes trying to figure this out because he's clarifying the only guy who raised his hand. It's not fair, it takes it away, it's inefficient. You think about attendance and those sort of things, and how we deal with that. Those are also dealt with using responseware. So now, instead of the professor saying, okay, who has the answer to this, they get the entire class engaged by basically saying, okay, here are 4 answers, A, B, C, or D. It's the same way that we see in Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and asking the audience type situation. The same thing happens. There's no reason why we can't use that technology for the benefit of everyone at the level playing field. And actually, the reality check that hit a lot of our professors was the fact that they said, after 10 years, what I discovered was that some of my teachings was not being registered. Because when I had A, B, C, or D, and I knew that D was the really wacky answer, and that 60% of my class were actually choosing D, that was really worrying for me. But the fact that we were able for them to be able to do a reality check and change the way they teach and change their pedagogy as a result of that, using a little device and a little technology like this, made a difference. And I think the other aspect of increasing collaboration within the classroom and using the iPad to be able to do this was also very beneficial. So with Inkling, if you have an account as a faculty member and your students have an account as students, you can effectively, using the aspect of social media, being able to follow each other. For this works really well because if a faculty member is able to highlight and annotate an entire chapter, he's created a level playing field for all of his students. It's pretty simple for him to walk into class now, as some of our professors in San Francisco do, not to say, I'm going to talk about chapter 3 and repeat things halfway through because someone didn't hear, except it's actually about walking in and saying, you've seen my notes on chapter 3, and every single person has got the exact same, is on the level playing field. Now it's actually about discussing it, because MBA schools are largely about discussion-based and team-based, and actually now seeing how that is applied. And I think that was a benefit that we basically saw. And if you take away everything else that I said, which some of my professors actually did, and I said, we really don't care about what you do, that's absolutely fine. One of the things that students will always do, once every 83 seconds in Boston in the accounting and finance class, and once every 3.5 minutes in the marketing class in London, is to take basically a photo of what they see on the board. It's just a common fact. It's actually kind of like a Star Wars thing where you see the sorry, I'm not a Star Wars freak, by the way. I just remember seeing this thing where you see the drones and the droids sort of walking up. You kind of see this in the classroom where, because of the way the seating is done, you sort of see every 3 minutes someone going like this, raising it, taking a photo, and then sitting down. I'm like, okay, it's very interesting to watch, but everyone finds it really, really normal. This person here kind of did it in front of the professor, and that actually put a real, it was actually nice because it sent a reality check for that specific professor to say, actually, maybe I should do more of this. So when he was doing tutorials or extra sessions with a smaller group, he'd usually either record those with his iPad and be able to send those off and share those accordingly. Same thing when it comes to, because our curriculum is largely team-based, people are able to basically refer back to both classes and to their own team sessions by simple features of that. It's a very simple feature that they use. Well, we've taken that in the classroom, we talked about productivity, and then we moved into alumni as well. We have a growing alumni base all over the world, so I researched this quite heavily and discovered there's a company called Evertrue Mobile who are based out of Boston, Massachusetts. They had just developed an app for Brown University. I didn't think it was very good. I wasn't being arrogant about it, just didn't think it was very good. So I called them up and said, I like what I see in terms of what you're trying to do. Is there something else you can do focused around what we're doing? And they're like, well, let's try and talk, and we collaborated a little bit more. And we helped develop an alumni app, which has now been adopted by about 90 schools in the US. It's being looked at by schools in the UK as well. And the objective really is to get away from alumni directory and print-based alumni content and actually move it into the mobile space. So this is available on iOS, it's available on Android, and actually what's happening is that you're able to basically, if you press on local, you're able to actually locate specific alumni. We then took it one step further and decided, well, actually, something we can do here is actually integrate with LinkedIn. And that's kind of what we did. So we spoke with LinkedIn, and we actually integrated with the LinkedIn API. So you can actually have a much better connected alumni base by ensuring that they're being able to be connected on LinkedIn rather than having to go outside and being able to remember and do all that sort of stuff. So it's a great company, and it's a great product that we use. So in closing, what have we done? Well, we've taken all of the aspects around productivity. So we gave students our training. We looked at textbooks. We looked at case packs. We looked at alumni. And we looked at the fact that we wanted to make sure that there was a level of sense of belonging to the school. We have a one-year intensive program. We have a very, very short downtime. That's one of the issues that I have, is literally I have a week between students graduating and leaving and a new class starting right across the globe. And part of the challenge was to make sure that the entire student experience was being able to take into place. So one of the things that we did was, what are the benefits? Well, increasing the time to learn, I think there was a huge benefit there. When we did a survey of our class, 27% was a class sample set that we gathered before they graduated, and they all said that the ability for them to time to learn was definitely higher. About 83% of them said that the iPad helped in their learning and being able to access their content and doing it very, very quickly, and that was really, really beneficial to them. 60% of our faculty now use the iPad in one way or the other in our classroom. That was a very long, hard journey that we undertook, but it was a learning point that they said that we want to be able to adopt it and adapt to it to make our teaching better, easier, and also create a better environment for our students. We also thought clearly with respect to printing and distribution costs. So Yale School of Medicine also did a similar exercise. They focused it on their neurobiology curriculum, 519 iPads that they deployed, and they saved over $350,000 in printing costs. And the dean of curriculum at Yale School of Medicine, Michael Schwartz, will tell you he has a photograph of a stack of paper, literally this much, which was the annual printing for that particular course, and literally replicated all of that delivered via the iPad. And that's it. Thank you.
Perfect.